if no one gets anything else out of this episode but this idea that in order for my business to get better, I have to get better. In order for my business to grow, I need to grow. That's the bottom line. So, okay, well, how do I do that? First, understand that I'm here as a student to work on me. I can be a better computer. A better computer. Oh my goodness. I can be a better leader. I can be a better husband or a wife. I can be a better restaurateur. I can be whatever that might be in my head. Like how other ways I identify those roles I play. I can be better at those. I don't have to go like, well, that's just who I am. I'm just a hothead. I've always been a hothead. Okay, you can always be passionate, but maybe, you fly off the handle and you speak mean to people. Maybe perhaps that can be changed. Is that possible? You weren't born that way. You might have grown into that person. So understanding that this can be malleable, and it starts with setting some goals on what it is that you want to accomplish, and then so I set a vision of what I want to accomplish, and I check in my beliefs around that.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro.
With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, the founder of the Center for Conscious Living and Fulfillment and the host of the Secret Thoughts of CEOs podcast, Chris Yonker. My man, Chris, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Psyched to have you here, and this is cool because my first memory of you is being a public speaker. You had a gig at Great Bay Community College. At the time, I was taking classes for marketing and hospitality, and I just remember thinking to myself, I vibe with this dude. It was 12 years ago. I can't remember exactly what the conversation was about, but I'm pretty sure it was centered around leadership and just like personal growth. Does that sound like something you'd be speaking about?
I'd say it's accurate.
Yeah, man. And we just over the past 10 years, both being entrepreneurs, working in coffee shops, we're constantly crossing paths.
And we saw each other in Chicago. And how weird was that?
That's right.
We're at the restaurant show, which is a freaking badass show.
Thousands of people.
I loved it. I was there for a client who sells into that realm. And what a fun place. And you can go around and eat stuff. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah. It's a cool. Wild show every year they put on there. But basically where I'm going with this is it feels like the universe has been suggesting we do something together. We're probably far overdue to be sitting down and officially recording in person, but I can't wait to dive into a little bit of who you are, the work you're doing, your knowledge. And we're going to be talking about something that we never talk a lot about on the show, but in the world of restaurants, I feel like this probably is more common in other verticals, but succession. The family business, paying it, giving it to the next generation. And what does that look like? So we have a lot to unpackage today. I can't wait to get into it. But before we do dive in, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Okay. You brought that up a few minutes ago that you were going to drop this. And I'm like, well, where do I go? What, one that always kind of comes to me is one that it's not so much to be busy. So too are the ants. The question is, what are you busy about? And I don't remember if I think it's Henry David Thoreau that came from. So
say it one more time for me.
Yeah, it's not so much to be busy. So too are the ants. Like the ants on the ground. Not your aunt and uncle. The ants. And the question is, what are you busy about? See, we have 24 hours in the day.
Right.
We have a week, a month. We can fill in the badge of busy. How are you busy? I bet you're busy. Oh, you're busy? Maybe ask me how my day was today earlier, right? Like it's a common question.
Right.
And then you went into hey, you something like, so you're busy. Oh, well, shit. We're all feeling our time.
Right.
Busy. I don't know. Like doing what?
Right.
And we have an epidemic of busyness, I think. We got to fill every damn minute of every day of doing something,
When I heard you say it, immediately what was going through my mind was just this idea that I feel like it's just being intentional with your time.
Right.
Like you said, 24 hours to a day. We all have a week. We all have a month. But I think no matter who you are and what your privilege is, no matter where you come from, the most equalizing thing is we all have the same amount of time in a day. No matter where you fall on the spectrum of privilege. So what are you doing with your time to get ahead and be living intentionally?
Well, you added in to get ahead. I didn't add that in.
What's that?
You said to get ahead. I didn't add that piece in.
Oh, but
right, you did add that in.
I did.
It's an inference.
Is that?
I don't
an issue?
know. It's just, what are you doing in it? It's
Right.
it's a reflection. It's an awareness. It's a check-in. Where am I at on that? And
Yeah.
there might, and that's, we can go really deep on this whole idea of getting ahead or whatever it is. Like what's that mean? Like what?
Right.
How do you? I've had entrepreneurs I've worked with that have owned very large businesses. Well, actually, all the clients we work with have large businesses. We work with privately held companies predominantly, and we can talk about that. But these folks, as they're looking at, especially in succession, what am I going to do next? Which is a whole other topic of letting go, especially if you're a first generation founder. But then it's, well, what's this all about? Why the hell am I here? What am I trying to accomplish? What is success? What's
Right.
success supposed to be? Is it,
I think that's a really important question. I think that we're kind of in this time right now where there's almost like this shift of values happening,
Yes.
where the next generation of professionals are like, do I really need to make $1 million?
It's a great
Do I need to make
question.
multi six figure?
I don't know what.
Can I
what-
be
what's
happy with
who am I trying to
60,000?
impress? What am
Right.
I trying to accomplish here? Who's, it's all, we've been, a lot of us have been imprinted from society and our upbringing in regards to who we are and what we're here to do and what that's supposed to be, and then how we measure ourselves against that in our lives, and it creates a lot of our madness.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy you're starting here, because in all my conversations, and I think one thing I've noticed about you that's unique to the work you do is you would tell a lot of people to like think about the life you want and then reverse engineer it, but you don't hear a lot about, I mean, you hear core values come into conversations, but really doing the work to distill who you are, what do you want as a person first, and how do you manifest that? How do you reverse engineer that? And I think it's kind of bedrocked, like embedded into society, that like the most important thing is status and wealth. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? And when most people want to be happy. Most people want to have joy, peace, fulfillment.
Yeah.
Like you check these boxes. If you look at like happiness and joy and peace, if you're tying conditions to your external reality, like something that has to occur externally to you obtaining these emotions, then you're never going to get there. That's part of the challenge. So there's a big difference between intrinsic motivation, which comes from within, and extrinsic motivation. Like what do I have? Like, oh, well, when are you happy? Well, when I make someone proud, or when someone tells me I did a good job, or whatever that is. I've asked people these questions. What drives your fulfillment? Oh, when folks acknowledge my work, or someone's that when I see this and there's a smile on someone's face. That can be great, that it gives you a serotonin hit. That's awesome. But if you're tying your own happiness to that external condition, then what's going to happen when that external condition doesn't occur?
Right.
Then you get to be unhappy.
Right. And it's funny they mention that, because I think in the restaurant industry, people in this industry are specifically kind of like junkies when it comes to being seen, being recognized. I think that's one of the reasons why, people in the restaurant industry notoriously have a substance abuse issue. Like it's
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you see, whether it's alcohol or drugs, people who are, hooked on those chemicals are drawn to this industry. But I think that it's true to being seen and recognized. I think that we are also hooked on that. And what other industry lets you get instant gratification over and over and over and over again, sometimes 100 times in a night, when you're seeing that immediate reaction on the guests and their experience, and when they're enjoying it, it's like, it's a drug. And to your point, like what happens, like I think that we take it even further, and a lot of people want to be seen, and they don't feel seen until they get that James Beard award or that Michelin star. And some of these people get into the industry with that being their goal.
Right.
Like, I want this level of industry recognition and accolade. I see it getting really dangerous when you don't get those things, and you think you're a loser. Meanwhile, you're making hundreds of people happy every night.
Right.
Like, what is important to you?
Yeah.
What's going through your mind as I'm saying that?
Yeah. I would think to that person, why did you choose to get into the industry? What was the driver for you, and what are you trying to accomplish, right? With the mission of your establishment, whether it be to create community,
right,
or to create an experience or a combination thereof, whatever that movie is we like to go out and we follow the food scene to the degree, I would say, and there's it's a really cool topic because it's something that we all share all over the planet, right? And if you look at community and you look at socialization, which is actually part of the longevity situation, if you study the blue zones, and there's been a lot of documentation on this, having a social, right, having a good social group of people around you, and typically when you see people around, food is in the mix of being social,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
So it in some cases it's tied to our life experience, no matter what the culture is. Food is a fabric within that, and so the folks that you get to meet with on a regular basis, it's kind of neat that they get to provide the opportunity for people to enhance their lives and have this
right.
deep, these deep relationships and place to go.
When I say things like the restaurant industry is going to change the world, I mean it. And that's for all those things that you're pointing out. Like it's the food and beverage is so ingrained into our DNA, into what we are, that we almost don't even, it's like air. We don't even recognize our like, it's a thing we take for granted. We need it to survive. It's a part. And what we put into our bodies, with the exception of maybe salt, was once living. It's all connected. It's all life. It's this cycle of life. But beyond that, it's this idea of, we literally get to be, like, our work is being gracious. It's being generous. And I think that idea of just giving and bringing people together and reminding, like, helping people connect to the roots of what it means to be human is what we do. And I think in a time where we're getting so away from what it means to be human, like, I think it's the restaurant industry that's going to, like, keep people grounded. What about, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I didn't mean to get into this little rabbit hole.
It provides a place. Well, it does. I mean, if I'm not meeting with friends at their home,
right,
where am I going to meet them?
At their house. Wait, no, at a restaurant.
Right.
Yeah.
The restaurant's going to be up there, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's going to be one of the top places we're going to get together.
Right.
Is it not? You and I got together recently. We went to a coffee shop.
Yeah, where were we?
Right. So it was, we could have met here, sure, but it was just, there's an energy, there's a vibrational energy of that environment also that caters to what it is.
It's powerful.
It is.
I don't even know if restaurateurs are aware of this. You know what I mean? I think we've commercialized and, commoditized this thing that was literally once living, food for the most part, less salt, or like everything we consume is, it's all tied. It's life, like we are experiencing life and we're giving life in that moment. And I think it's kind of crazy how we just got away from that. But anyway, I feel like we're going into a rabbit hole right now. And I didn't mean
rabbit
to
holes are
right
good.
out
I don't mind them.
But
that's where we find the best things.
Help me understand who you are. Help me and the listeners kind of get a better idea of who Chris Yonker is and how you got to where you the work you're doing today.
Yeah. So the nonlinear path. I was born in the Midwest.
Okay. Only
child. Grew up in a dysfunctional home with substance abuse with both parents. And I went through the ringer, and I was like I had no self-confidence, no self-esteem, self-worth. My level of self-love was low. I was a bullying target. So I was really, it's funny when folks, somebody thinks like, oh, you're going to go back, talk about high school. Hey, do you want to go back to high school? I'm like, no, I don't. It was a miserable experience. Like I really did not enjoy my high school. Some people do. I did not. It was a transformative time for me. I started studying karate when I was 15.
I knew that about you, and I was curious if this is why.
I still do today at 54. So you can do the math on that. I've never stopped working out, and I've been instructing for quite some time. It's part of the fabric of just my being, of who I am. But that experience allowed me to have a new reality that said, wait a minute. Maybe I can do something and have success with that. Like I'm advancing in rank, and it gave me a situation where I could accomplish something, and it fed my self-worth and self-esteem. And then I started, and not even knowing I was doing this, I started challenging my own paradigm around my ability. That, coupled with the fact that I'm a personal development junkie, and then I got hired at 3M out of college, worked there for over 25 years.
What's 3M?
3M, Scotch tape company, Filtrete, Post-it notes. We can go on and on.
Got it.
Yeah, a lot of.
And what were you doing with them?
I was in sales, so I started in just direct sales, and then I worked into a leadership role where I help manage strategy and execution nationally on part of our business.
And how long were you doing that?
Well, the leadership side probably 10 years, but 25 years of time at 3M altogether.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
you said 25.
25. Yeah.
So is that what you were doing right up until you left to do your own
Yeah.
thing?
So I started my own business in parallel, and I've been running my own company now for 10 years. But I was, up to, let's say 5 years ago, I was still doing both. And, I had a good 6-figure income from and also a pension and all the benefits and a car and all the things that come with that. But I started building my own consulting business and coaching business because along that line, because I was investing so much time and money into my own personal development, a lot. And I trained with Anthony Robbins' original mentor who worked with me on how to learn in NLP. And I just kept taking this work to my own life and then to people I came across. And then it led to people asking me if I could help them. So
what was the early work you were doing on yourself?
Wow. I think one of the biggest things that hit me was, and this was probably, I want to go back, maybe, it doesn't really matter, let's say 20 years ago, was getting exposed to things around like Think and Grow Rich, which is a book by Napoleon Hill. It's been around a very long time. Napoleon Hill was basically hired to study the wealthiest people at the time.
Ironically, that book popped into my head when you opened with your quote, being
Really?
intentional with your time. Because one of the big takeaways for me in that book was that the people who are successful commit 100% of everything they do, their attention to whatever it is that they want, their vision, their dream.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, so that's good for you to and there's a lot of folks in your age range who've never heard the book, right? It's been around a long time.
Fewer and fewer people haven't heard of that book. I feel like as we march into the future, I don't know if it's just because I am getting more into this stuff, but it seems like more and more average people are getting access to this type of... Have you not noticed that?
Some degree, yes. Psycho-Cybernetics is another one that's a really interesting book by Maltz. That's another piece of work that I studied. So as I got into these books, I realized, and then I worked with a coach, my first coach, Tom, who I'm still great friends with. I'm like, wait a minute. These things I'm thinking are driving my experiences. I was like, what? It was like I literally took, like, Tom helped me. He gave me like this red pill, back to the Matrix. And I was like, holy, I started seeing, I'm like, why didn't someone tell me all this before? This is fascinating. I could actually have authority over my emotions. My emotions people don't make me mad. I'm actually involved with that situation.
It's a choice.
Yeah,
it's
but
crazy.
It was almost like there's this cause and effect scenario that Covey talked about, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a great book I studied back about 30 years ago. And there's a space in between cause and effect. And so then that's where decision happens. That's where the space of something happens. What meaning am I assigning to whatever this is? And then the choice I make around that. But even the meaning I assign to that, it's all a fabrication.
Right. Do you, in that moment, divert your attention to letting your primal instinct take over and your emotion, i.e. emotion, or
sure.
Or do you let that frontal lobe, do you divert that energy to the more outer part of your brain, the less primitive?
Yeah. Well, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to override, right? When we get in a fight or flight, it can be very difficult.
You don't have the time to
right.
To breathe.
You're in it,
yeah.
Right? And we all have a sense of security. And because I grew up in a situation that had so much uncertainty day to day in my childhood of how life was going to be in a day or in an afternoon or in an evening, it created this high alert environment where my parasympathetic nervous system, even today to some degree at times, it goes into high alert all of a sudden. Like this, I'm operating at this intense level, and it's fascinating. As I become more and more aware, I can start unwinding and working on it, through different practices that I've started studying yoga and working with and I was just like, okay, thank God for my wife to follow that path over 20 years ago. But then coming across other people, I'm like, and I'll track people down. I'm like, oh, I want to hire this person who's one of the top people in the field that I think can teach me, and I'll work with them, and because I want to take it in, right? And so I spend tens of thousands of dollars a year to this day on my own personal development.
Yeah, and it all started with this mentor you hired, Tom.
Tom.
He started like recommending these books to you.
He did.
Nice.
He did.
So 25 years working at M3, was it?
3M, man.
3M,
Scott,
sorry.
the Scotch
I
tape.
know.
You got to know what that Post-it notes, like who doesn't know what that is?
I know what Scotch tape is. I know what Post-it
Scotch
notes
guard.
I never knew that 3M was behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing it for 25 years.
Yes.
You start, putting this money that you're making back into yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Were you unhappy, or did you feel like you needed to get ahead? Like what was driving this?
I was driven. I still am. I'll call myself a recovering high achiever.
Okay.
I'm just like the clients that I serve today. People who are very driven on extrinsic motivation to be the best, to whatever it is. What are your goals? Okay, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, and goals are good. I'm not against them at all. But when we're driving goals against I want to be a millionaire and I want to do this or that. I mean, I had a best-selling author that had hired me a few years ago. And I remember her telling, and ask her, what do you want? I want, and she's done very, very well. I want a private plane so I can fly it back home and tell everyone, how great I've done. It's like, whoo.
Is that literally what you asked or said that you wanted?
That's what she said she wanted.
That's what she said she wanted.
She wanted a private plane so she could fly back home and prove, it goes back to like, look at me. Let me prove myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think what comes to my mind when I hear you say this, I think of Simon Sinek's one of his, I think it's his more recent works, The Infinite Game.
That's right.
Where
that's right.
he basically he talks about what you're describing right now is I think there was a society that was kind of all, just consumed with status and materialistic, the extrinsic. Is that what you're?
Well, basically it's like I've got to hit this goal and then I'm good. But then he kind of is like, well, what if it's ongoing? Like, what if the game's ongoing? It's not like it just ends at the end of the fourth quarter, right? And that's where that's where Simon Sinek was going. He's changing the paradigm around how you look and approach success.
Yeah, like we are the byproduct of a finite game. A game that only has winners and losers, and it's all about being the best. It's about, and he uses all these examples of different companies that felt guilty, like Microsoft, and like he would compare Microsoft to say Apple,
right?
And Apple's game was to, I can't remember exactly, to change the world. I think is like in a roundabout way what their mission was.
Yep.
But when you have an infinite game to make the world better or to create transformation, where there is no finish, there is no end,
right?
It's what ends up happening is you just constantly are improving it. But but I think one of the biggest things that what I'm trying to pull out of your story is it sounds like you said you were a recovering, what was it?
A recovering workaholic, recovering high achiever, all those things.
So it sounds like you're successful in the work you're doing in sales.
I was rated at the top of the sales organization
happy?
year over year over year. No.
Why? What was missing?
Fulfillment, peace. It's like you achieve a goal and then you're like, well, man, I still feel hollow inside.
Right.
Well, I got it. I got the goal. But now I need this. Now I need the next thing.
What was your mindset?
Because the next thing's what's going to make me happy.
So that was your mindset, is that you had to constantly just go after these things.
Yeah.
What were the things? Give me examples of the things that you were
I remember when I bought a Rolex, because everyone, successful people had Rolexes.
Yeah.
I need to have a Rolex, so I bought one. And then after I had it,
maybe
I'm like,
for a couple of days it was cool.
Yeah. Then I'm like, I got rid of it.
I still know what time it is.
I sold it. I've owned two, and I've sold them both. I don't even have one right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it was like, it didn't give me what I thought it would give me. It didn't. It just didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't satisfy that.
So where was the change, the pivot for you? This was that around the time you started? Were you coaching people at this time when you still had these materialistic desires, or was
sure I was. I mean, when I started, yeah, but it's changed over the last probably 7, 8 years. It's a gradual process, but it's just you realize. I think part of it really that drove some of the change for me is just watching, like my grandparents pass away and having that experience, especially when I was really close to them, and witnessing the reflection of how they looked and looked at their own lives. Having my grandfather was 99.
Wow.
And he had a really great life. And in many cases, I've kind of modeled off of him at this point in time in regards to how he lived it, because it was so rich and full. And it wasn't, he had success, but it didn't matter to him, right? He bought used cars. He could have bought new. There's a lot of things that he did because so he just satisfied what really felt good for him to do. And it seemed like, well, when you watch people pass away, I think it's a constant reminder of like, okay, we're all mortal and every day is a gift. So how am I going to live it at the highest level? And it's going to be chasing some other shit, because what ends up happening, some people had hired me, I'm looking at their lives and they have issues with their kids. They don't have relationships with their kids because they were never home because they were always working. And they said, well, I did it for my family. And then some of them had divorces because they weren't there for their spouse. It's like, well, what are we doing this all for? You say, well, what's important to you? Oh, my wife and my kids. Okay, but you don't spend any time with them. You don't spend any energy with them. It's like they constantly get your leftovers ongoingly, and you can't ever make them a priority. It's a disconnect.
Right. So in your career with 3M, when did you say, like, I want to transition away from being into sales into I want to do my own entrepreneurial thing? And I love that you didn't just like close the door on 3M and just start your own business. You kind of were doing both. I did for a while. So what was that evolution for you? I mean, I guess what I'm curious, so before today's conversation, like I do with a lot of my guests, especially when they're not restaurateur guests, because I have a pretty standard interview with my restaurateurs. Who are you? How'd you get into the industry? Yeah. How'd you get to where you are today? Who are you today? What does your business look like? What have you learned? Where are you going? Mm-hmm. You're not my standard guest. You're somebody who's a coach, an expert on this idea. How would you describe yourself today if somebody asks you what you do?
It depends. We do consulting, we do family business advisory work, and we do coaching. So sometimes, some cases, we're not therapists, but we do therapy. So we wear several hats, and it depends on the work that we're doing with the clients we're working with.
I mean, a lot of what I like about when I was just looking into like, hey, Chris, like, what do you want to talk about? Give me a list of things you want to talk about. The things that stand out to me are this idea, and just in reading the bullets that you shared with me, the things you would like to discuss, is that you've kind of figured out that whatever your end game is needs to be reverse engineered with who you are today. Yeah. Kind of. Right. So like, I don't often have the opportunity, some of the things I highlighted in the list of things you offered, inner selves, childhood experiences and how that shapes your entrepreneurial journey, trauma, like childhood experience, how does that, like, what is this? Yeah. This stuff? So get into this.
Yeah. So as you look at someone's, drivers and what they're pursuing, right? And so like, well, I'm looking to build a restaurant. Awesome. Great. Why? Why is that important to you? And what would someone say, like, well, why is it important? When you ask people those questions, so why do they get in the business? What's the common things that you hear?
I mean, I don't like to speak for other people, but the reason why I love the industry, and this is probably common for a lot of people, is it's the type of work. It's the act of constantly moving around, constantly being able to engage with people, whether they're your guest or your team. Yep. For me, the number one thing that draws me to this industry is the people who work in this industry. They don't pretend to be anybody but themselves. And they usually work in this industry because that who they are isn't quote unquote professional. But I don't know what does that word professional even mean?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, it's your ability to do the job, right? But when you have to go put a corporate face on, or like a quote unquote professional face, and in my eyes and how I interpret the word professional is a certain way that lets you get along with a lot of people. Because in the corporate world, you have to get along with a lot of people. So I think what I love about the restaurant industry, to come full circle, is that it's like, this is who I am. Love me or hate me. I mean, obviously working with food and things like that, pretty great. But what's going through your mind as I'm sharing these things?
Well, I'm just thinking of the people that I know that own restaurants, and kind of, there's a mix. Some people are front of the house. Some people are the back of the house. And those are different type of drivers. Like, do I want to be out in the mix of the the public per se, or do I want to be behind the scenes, right? So there's different drivers there, and neither right or wrong. It comes down to is, what makes you really happy internally, but additionally, what's holding you back from being your authentic self. So what I mean by that is we constantly filter, or we can, and I was this way for a long time, where I would sit together with someone like you, and I would like literally leave my body and kind of go out and go, oh, what's he thinking right now? Does he think I'm smart? Does he think, did I say something stupid? Oh, what are they going to think of that right now? Oh my God, I'm on camera. Blah, 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 blah. And, and it's like back and forth, back. Oh, she smiled at me. Oh, do I have a booger on my nose? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's exhausting. And it gets to a point where, like, when you own yourself enough, you literally don't care I care about you as a person, but how you take me or don't take me has zero impact on my life or my own self-worth in myself, right? So our self-worth comes in full, but we have life experiences that reflect back on us, and we start taking dings out of it. So how much we look at our self-esteem, and the two biggest limiting beliefs is what's possible and what's possible, and what's possible for me. What can I do, right? That's a big limiting belief for most people is, they could do that, but I couldn't do that, right? That's not me. Well, what's that mean? Well,
I'm so guilty of this.
It's not me because, well, I'm not that person. Well, totally cool. Yeah, you're not that person, but it doesn't mean you can't have the same level of results from that as a person, or different. It's totally irrelevant. But we get into this comparison mode, and when we don't have a full high self-esteem, self-security, and love in ourselves. So like if I love, for example, I'm working with a let's say a business owner, and they're like, I'm just I have a hard time relating to my kids and how they feel. And when they're talking to me like this, I'm having a hard time relating to my kids and how they feel. Well, can you tell me more about that? Well, I don't understand how they feel. Well, how do you feel right now? I don't understand your question. Yeah, because your emotions are out here. And I've had people like that. I had one client who's, he was 8 years old and his brother got killed.
Wait, your client was 8?
When he was 8, right?
Oh, okay.
So he was this way.
Like,
so his emotions are out here. Why did he do that? But then when we have trauma, that's why I bring up trauma.
Yeah.
When we have trauma, typically one or two things happen. But one common one is that we learn to disassociate from our emotions because we didn't want to feel the pain. If your brother died and you're like, it's a brilliant wisdom our mind has. I don't want to go into this. My parents became in this person's case, parents became alcoholics. They couldn't handle it. I've seen situations like this where someone else had committed suicide in the family, and they're like, so their emotions are like, you know what? I don't want to feel that shit. It's horrible. I don't even know what to do with it. And so unconsciously, they become unavailable emotionally. Now you're leading a business, or you have a family business, and you can't have a conversation to build empathy, because how can I feel to build empathy? The proper way is for me to leave my body and feel how you feel. And I'll feel you feeling me. It's like this reverse, it's like this constant loop of, but I can't feel how you feel if I can't feel how I feel. If I'm not grounded, I can't go there. It's not even possible. And so like that's what we're, and there's a lot of us have had, either big trauma or little trauma in our lives, and no one's taught us how to deal with this. And then and what ends up happening is it impacts even how we lead people and or how we communicate with our family members.
So when you're working with your clients, like how do you get, like, do you have like these like literal like sit down, like where do you start to fully understand these people?
Our team, depending on the client, what we like to do is when we're working with, it depends, but let's just say it's a family business. I'll use an example, and I know some of your listeners are family businesses. We'll work with several family members, and we'll coach them one-on-one, and we're just going to get real to the whole goal is initially is, how do I help this person get grounded? How do I help them just be able to sit in the, become more aware of what they're thinking, become more aware of how they're feeling, become more aware of just, in essence, how they define themselves, right? I mean, I had a client, was talking to the other day, and I said, I have 2 questions I want us to talk about today. And he said, okay. I said, one question is who am I? He's like, what? I said, yeah, I'd like you to really write that question out, and I want you to contemplate that question for the next, between now and we chat next. Well, that's a pretty deep question. I said, I know. But like, our reality becomes a fabric of our definition of self. Who am I? Sometimes we say, well, I'm a judge, I'm a lawyer, I'm an electrician, I'm a restaurateur, I'm a, whatever. I'm a sous chef. That's a role we play. That's not who we are.
That's what you are, not necessarily who, right?
Yeah. So you play that role, or I'm a father, or I'm a husband, or I'm a, they're great. That's important. They're roles we play. It's not who we are. Right?
Right.
Because we get a little lost in that. And then the other question is why am I here? What's this thing about? What the hell? What's this thing life about? Why am I here on this planet at this point in time?
Who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah.
I think we're going to take a break to thank our sponsors. When I get back, I want to kind of unpackage the breakthroughs you've had. Like, give me examples of like what the right answers in your mind are only one person can answer that, right? But I want to unpackage that a little bit more.
Okay.
We have to interrupt today's episode to let you know that every second and fourth Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, Restaurant Systems Pro CEO Fred Langley is going live to teach you everything you need to know to run a profitable restaurant from soup to nuts. All you got to do is click the link below.
We're back. So you just asked, when you're working with these clients, you mentioned that you ask, who are you? And
who am I? Yeah, then so I'd be asked, Eric, I want you to go home and I want you to sit and this, maybe it's a meditation, maybe it's a reflection, but I just want you to ask yourself, who am I? And just sit with that and see what comes up for you. And then the no judgment. It's just a question.
Well, and then why was the other part of that.
Yeah, why am I here? Why am I here? Like, what's life about? And oftentimes some of us will practice a religion, we may have spiritual context to that, and that's totally cool. And that's a place for that to come into us to explore what that means and looks like for us. And the spiritual, which is, and it's funny because I talk about spirituality, people go like, well, yeah. It's like, well, when I ask most people, do you believe in something beyond us that's involved, whether it's the universe or God or whatever your definition of it, I had one client that said no. One. And then later on, she was an author, and later she authored a book about spirituality 5 years later.
Wow.
Because she was an atheist.
Yeah. I would say I'm an agnostic, and like there's got to be something else going on out there that we're just unaware of. For me, the verdict's out. Like, I know that there's something else out there that's influencing us. That's a greater, like, I would say I'm a spiritual person. I believe in something else, but I just don't know what the actual distilled, like, what literally is that? Like, who friggin' knows?
What a fun quest, right?
Right.
And I suggest to folks is like, and you had asked me earlier about things to think about around breakthroughs, and this one this kind of gets into that realm. Do you believe that you and I have choices in what we think and believe?
I think we do.
Okay.
But there's probably something.
Could you decide if you wanted to get up and go to the bathroom right now in the middle of the podcast?
I could.
Yeah, right. So you could think about that or not think about that.
Right.
True?
True.
Right, yeah. So we have choice.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's a gift we all have as human beings, is we have the ability to choose what we think, which can be harder because a lot of us haven't been taught how to run our minds. Our minds run us all the time. We also have the ability to choose how we feel. If we have time, we'll get into that later. And then we have choices in things that we do. Like, I get that. So now I can also choose to believe. You could choose to believe in a religion. You could, subscribe to a religion, and you could choose to believe that. You could choose to do that if you wanted to. True?
True.
You could choose to believe that eating, Frosted Flakes is good for you every day. You could choose to believe that. Like, we can go down the realm. Like, we could choose to believe that. We could choose to believe that smoking a couple cigarettes a day is okay for you personally. We could choose to, these are all choices. These are all things that we could believe. My daughter asked me the other day, she said, She's 9. She said, "Are cigarettes illegal?" I said, and I'm like, why would you ask that? Because she knows of 3 people that had cigarettes in their lives that she knows close to her that have died from cancer. That was interesting. Yeah. No, they weren't breaking the law, and it's legal. Why? But smoking definitive leads to cancer, doesn't it? And I said, well, most people would probably argue true. That's true.
Yeah.
But why isn't it illegal then? I'm like, that is a really good question.
It's illegal for 9-year-olds.
That's a really good question, though, isn't it?
Right.
And I'm like, because it really is. It's interesting. Why would we allow something to be legal that we know is lethal? Why would we do that? Why?
Freedom.
If it does, right?
America.
Yeah. Well, and we're not the only country.
Oh, that's true.
Right? There's other countries that do have a lot more smoking than we do. But when I grew up, you could walk down the sidewalk, you come across. It's weird if I come across someone that's smoking anymore. Things have changed a lot in that realm, big time. So, but these are beliefs. They're paradigms. They're things that we choose to believe.
My dad just quit after 54 years. I want to give him a little shout out.
Good for him.
Yeah. He started when he was 13 years old.
What was the driver for him?
Oh, probably it looked cool.
Interesting.
I mean,
okay.
I don't know if that was still the case when he was in his 50s, but like...
Yeah, but was the driver to quit? Wasn't to look cool.
Oh, I'm sure a lot of his friends are dying. He's in his late 60s now.
Yeah, so that's what we'll talk about.
Mortality.
That's one thing I want to talk about is vision creation and driving change. We'll talk about that today. That's really important. So this is a big piece to that. The things that we want, the things we want to do, the lives we want to live, it's all tied to beliefs. It's all tied to things that we believe, right? All of it is.
Right.
You believe if someone's going to be a good guest. You believe if they were a good guest. You believe if someone's got a good, it's got a good food. We can go on and on and on. I can believe about what's building a business is hard. I can believe in building a business is easy. Say, well, no, that's hard. Well, that could be your frame. You're so convicted that it's hard. I'm not saying it's convenient. I'm not saying that you don't ever have challenges. I think that's all true. Absolutely. But we create these beliefs and then we live them out as our existence, right? So an example would be health and wellness. Someone would say, well, I'll ask people, what do you believe about health and well-being and with your age? And people will say, well, I believe that as I age, I'm going to start losing some of my faculties. People say that. Or I'm like, oh, well, how do you know that's true? Well, I look at my friends or I look for evidence, right? I'm like, okay, well, that's there's a movie that my wife and I are going to watch. She was just pointed out to me last night based on it's got a pretty good cast and it's based on a true story of a lady who is 60 years old and swam from like Florida to Cuba or some crazy ass thing, right?
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
But she started training when she was 60. So I mean, we can find evidence. Something's only true if it's true 100% of the time.
Right.
If it's not true 100% of the time, then it's based upon a belief. And so my point is, like, if we're going to have beliefs, we should probably do inventory of them and get clarity if they're empowering us or not.
Well, I have also learned that your truth isn't my truth, and that truth is relative.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a true statement?
Sure. But your truth is still based on an illusion.
I mean, that's getting deep, right?
I know. I don't know how else not to be deep, though. That's what I do.
Right. I think it's a self. I don't know. I feel like it's the illusion relative to you because it's the truth you're telling yourself.
That's right. But you have authority over it. That's the point.
Right.
So I would like the listeners to get is that we have authority over these beliefs. We can choose to start questioning them and asking ourselves, well, what's going on right here? Well, I'm having a situation. Why? Business is not good. Okay. What do you believe about that? Well, I believe people don't go out to dinner anymore. That's a belief. Is that true 100% of the time everywhere? No. Okay. All right. So why do you believe that's true? And you get dig in. Well, what if that weren't true? Then what would that mean? Right? And that there could be, someone could have data that, our traffic is down. Like that's feedback. But we often make assumptions. And this is an interesting one. So we have one of the exercises that we do sometimes with clients when working with teams or leadership teams is called the marshmallow challenge. You ever heard of this thing?
Yeah, it's will you eat the marshmallow or not?
Nope.
No,
That's
different.
No, that's different. No, that's not.
Is it
That's the one they did
where
with the
you're building
kids.
bridges.
Nope. So
Okay.
you basically give people it's like 7 pieces of spaghetti, hard spaghetti.
Yeah. Okay. got
One marshmallow. One
it.
marshmallow.
And you got to build the structure as high
That's
as possible.
right. That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I've done this one.
Right? You've done it.
Yeah.
And so what's the challenge? What happens for most people in that exercise? People listening out there, you got one marshmallow, you've got a piece like 1 yard of masking tape that you can do what you want with it. You have basically like, I don't know, 7 minutes or 12 minutes, whatever it is on the clock. You're racing. You're on teams. You're racing other people.
Too, right?
Yeah, hard spaghetti.
Yeah.
That's the structure, right? You
Yeah.
build a structure of spaghetti and the tape, and the goal is to build a structure that the marshmallow sits on the top of the structure, and the person who's got the highest structure in the room, freestanding, no one's touching, wins. Now the structure can't be hung from the ceiling or anything like that. It's got to be on the table, freestanding. So you get people in the room, and they go after this, and they're all going at it. They're watching one another if they're all in the same room and trying to compare and like, what do they do? What do they do? Okay. And from my experience, 9 out of 10 times, nobody tests the weight of the marshmallow. I think the marshmallow's light. It's a marshmallow.
Yeah.
So they build this freaking thing. They got like 30 seconds left. They put the marshmallow on top, and the thing starts falling over.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do. And they also have string too. But they don't know what to do because like, holy shit, there's enough time to rebuild this thing. But if at the beginning I tested how that marshmallow responded with this 1 or 2 strands of spaghetti and what it took to hold it up. But everyone they don't even put the marshmallow on the damn thing until they're almost done.
Yeah.
And that is an assumption built on a belief. The belief that the marshmallow is light. And we constantly, and I use this with family businesses a lot, or privately held companies, or what people we work with, is because I will say, well, where are the other marshmallows in your business? Where are we creating assumptions about data? We have so much data. I love data now, even like in restaurants. It's so cool because you got reservation systems, right? You got you can look at turns on a table,
Right.
all this great stuff that 20 years ago restaurants didn't have. But what meaning am I assigning to this data, and then how am I driving decisions around that?
Well, I mean, I think this is such a relative conversation because there's so many assumptions made about the restaurant industry. And I think for the longest time, what people in the restaurant industry did, they just asked themselves, what was the person, like, what do they do? Like, it's just, we just pay it forward. Like, not pay it forward, but like, how do I explain this? You just look at what the people were doing before us, and you take all those lessons and you copy it and you start your own thing. And it's like this certain business model that's been followed for 100 years where like, this is how you run a restaurant. And we don't challenge that way of running a restaurant, to look at it from different perspectives, to use modern technology, to stop thinking about the business as just being selling goods and commodities. We're not just selling food. We're creating experiences. We add so much more value than just the end of the day, just selling food. We're so much more than that. And we just get stuck in that old way of thinking, and but to your point, like really just challenging like what our beliefs are about what's true. Like, if you can blow the roof off of what's possible, then that's, and when you really create something that's reverse engineered as far as like, what do I want? What's important to me? The whole reason why I want to get into this is this idea of, I say behind every great restaurant is a great person. And in order for you to meet your fullest potential, I think you really need to your point, like, what are my values?
Yeah.
Who am I?
That's right.
Why am I? Like, why do I want these things?
Yeah.
So,
and what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about myself? I'd ask that owner, what do I believe about myself as the owner of this restaurant?
well, what I'm hoping to get out of today's conversation is if we've never really taken the time to reverse engineer who we are and why we do what we do, and like, how do we get to this point of self-awareness?
Yeah.
Well,
it starts with asking questions.
Okay.
Right? That's the awareness starts coming from as the questions that we ask, because when the mind is hooked by a question and it drives direction for us, right? It drives direction for us. So it's, like, okay, well, what do I want? If someone's sitting here, I'd say, as a restaurateur, what do you want? Well, I want, what, and why? Why is that important to you? And So you're right. Mission, vision, core values. I'm sure you've talked to people on the podcast about like that's a semblance of a starting point, right? Why do I exist? Mission. Why am I here? That goes back to the conversation we had about the endless game, right? That's the mission. The mission is endless. It's why do I exist? And what if I took this restaurant out of the community? What would be missed here? Oh man, do you remember Loaf and Ladle? Huh. Right? There's one that I can think of right here in Exeter, right? Like anyone that's been here for 20 years knows about Loaf and Ladle, right? Because it was
that Anadama, man, I miss it.
Right. The Anadama was the bomb, right? Yeah, it was so thick, and they cut the bread so damn thick.
I know.
And when I have family come here from the Midwest, they're like, "Can we go to Loaf and Ladle?" Right? Because there's no Loaf and Ladle like that in the Midwest. Well, we especially in communities where there are suburbs. You know, I'm not putting Panera bread down, but it's not the same.
Right.
And it was so it's like, but that has never been replaced in this community. There still to this day is not a really proper. The Green Bean got close, but they didn't. They leased the building out to someone else. So there's no one left in this community that provides that same experience, and so it's missed. So that mission is missed here in the fabric of.
So what
this
would you
town.
have said their mission was?
That's a great question. They provided an experience where you almost got like it was almost like going to a relative's kitchen where you got you picked out the soup. You didn't know you had a board. You didn't know what the soup of the day was going to be, and there was a bunch of them. There could be like 5 or 7, right? Yeah. You didn't know which ones they're going to be. There's maybe 1 or 2 mainstays. They had a little salad bar.
It was kind of a fast casual setup.
It was.
You'd walk in and you tell them what you want. They would take you along this journey.
That's right.
This U-shaped journey.
That's right. And you pick your soup, and then you get 1 or 2 pieces of bread, depending if you get a cup or a bowl.
Right.
And then
the combo soup and sandwich.
That's right. Yeah, you get a half sandwich, and it was so good. The bread was baked daily, and then you had these homemade like from scratch kind of soups, and then you had like this room, this other room you carry your tray in, and these long tables like this community, and people would come in with families or sports team, whatever it was, and they would just gather there. And then Andy, he'd have music in, at nights and time, stuff like that, and so it was a really just fabric of the community space that was almost like an extended someone's living room that had been extended,
right,
where you can go and hang out. And that's kind of the feeling and vibe I always got from that place.
Right. I mean, I worked with it was Aiden and Alder. The Eulery brother. I know it was the Eulerys that owned that place, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my mind, it's like I remember talking. I worked with one of them. I can't remember if it was Aiden or Alden. I think it was Aiden. But I mean, I know why that restaurant's not around anymore. I knew it had issues with like a lot of what other restaurants have issues with is like the systems, the processes, the accounting, the back end stuff. It's like they can create that experience, and they love the food, and they leverage
the restaurant location to open one in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
And Portsmouth was not the same market.
No, totally.
And then that leverage that they created off this restaurant, the Portsmouth location, really, from what I understand, really pulled that down.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, it was because they couldn't make the numbers work.
Yeah.
In that community.
So, what was your original thought bringing the Loaf and Ladle in?
The mission.
Yeah.
If you have a strong enough mission and you come out of a community, then like and I wouldn't suggest you do that, but that's a test that your mission's solid, right? Yeah. Like, and it's missed, and that's the way to look at your business is like, if I wasn't here in this community, what would this community miss? That's an interesting way to kind of ask. It's a different question to ask about your mission of why you're here. What are you providing your marketplace long term that lives beyond you, so to speak, if it continues through time, right? And if you disappeared. Well, you're like, holy shit, man! Now what am I going to do? Like if Laney and Lou went out of town, I'd be like, oh man.
Well, that's a great example right there. That's a company I really know because I worked there for a little bit. I don't know if you remember that, Jennifer DeRoser's. In like her mission is to live vibrantly and to teach other people how to live vibrantly.
Right.
So that is a mission that is not finite. That's relative. What does vibrantly mean 5 years from now? Like what new information are we going to have that will help people live more vibrantly? It's like this open-ended mission statement of this is the change I want to see in the world.
Yep.
For Jen DeRozier, she wanted to see options for people to make the best choice. There weren't options to make good choices.
That's right.
So she wanted to empower her community to make good choices around well-being and food, and to foster community around that. So like that's a perfect example of a infinite game. There is no end.
Right.
So my mission is to inspire, empower, and change the world. 20 years from now, what is inspiring and what is empowering going to look like?
Right.
That's a never-ending game.
Right.
Because the world we live in is constantly changing, that we can always get better, you know? So like back to some of the points that you're giving me, like explore the idea of entrepreneurship reflecting our inner selves. So what is it like? What is the change you want to see? What is,
that's really the key is like, okay, so I have this goal of growing my business. Maybe I want to have multiple locations someday, whatever that might be. You know, Jen wanted to have multiple locations. Now she's got two Laney and Lou's, plus she's got the Ginger Fox, a third location.
What is the Ginger Fox?
Oh, wait, that's an artisan bakery. Yeah,
it's like a European
style bakery.
That's right. I still got to check that out.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's different, but it's got her thumbprint on it in relationship to, she's really good at building systems, really good at building consistency, right? Like she's in quality. Yeah. Like you never, ever, ever wonder if you're not going to get something the same.
Right.
And it's not fast food. It's pretty cool. It's
right.
more consistent than fast food, the regular fast food. So you get clarity in what is it that I want. But even for Jen would say this, because I know her, and I know she went to, before she opened Laney and Lou, she went to a Robbins event. I think she did Date for Destiny. She might have done all the major events. But Robbins is really good at getting people to question, like, what do I want? But then who am I, right? And the same thing, like, because you have to become, and this is where it gets interesting, you literally become the person who creates the results that you want. Like that's the being, you become that person. Like, and you otherwise it's not sustainable. You won't, it's not going to happen. And you won't typically break through anyway until you become that person. So, and that's where it gets really, really interesting. Like even when we decided to set the next threshold for our company, the Center for Conscious Living and Fulfillment, when we started expanding our team, I didn't wanted to make it just about me. It was before it was just about me, and it's like, well, it's not about me anymore. So I had to think differently. Okay, well, when some family comes and wants to work with us, they may not work with me. They might work with someone else on the team. They work with me just a little bit.
And I think this is something that restaurant owners really get in trouble with, because they end up building a whole business that hinges on them. And the majority, a lot of restaurant, the ones that fail when they try to move themselves, like they realize that if they're not there, the business doesn't run.
Right.
Like literally everything hinges and goes.
And I'd argue it's not really a business. Right. And a lot of what I have is not a business either, because if I unplug myself, I would still have revenue, but wouldn't be the same, because I still am involved with, but we're in evolution. And as we continue to grow, it's like that 80-20, where's the 20% I'm going to focus on, the 80% I'm going to let go, and am I going to outsource it, or am I going to have someone else on the team, or am I going to backfill myself? And it's the same when we get to succession. It's the same. One of the ideas is philosophy is the same. I got to become insignificant to the business in relationship to operations. If you're tied to a true CEO at some point should not be involved in operations. They should be working on vision, strategy, and people. That's it. That's where that job should sit in a company. Yeah.
But I mean, one of the things I'm curious about in terms of how do we get to this point? So like, just looking at the notes that you gave me, it sounds like it's a lot of just inner reverse engineering what truly matters to me. And you have things like your childhood experiences and how those shape your entrepreneurial journey. Like in looking back at the trauma, and how's trauma shaping your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. So I went for someone looking to create goals. Don't understand that our paradigms about ourselves impact how we perform and what we do. You with me? What we think and believe about ourselves drive us. And so it's an ongoing process. If no one gets anything else out of this episode but this idea that in order for my business to get better, I have to get better. In order for my business to grow, I need to grow. That's the bottom line. So, okay, well, how do I do that? First, understand that I'm here as a student to work on me. I can be a better computer. A better computer. Oh my goodness. I can be a better leader. I can be a better husband or a wife. I can be a better restaurateur. I can be whatever that might be in my head, like how other ways I identify those roles I play. I can be better at those. I don't have to go like, well, that's just who I am. I'm just a hothead. I've always been a hothead. Okay, you can always be passionate, but maybe, you fly off the handle and you speak mean to people. Maybe perhaps that can be changed. Is that possible? You weren't born that way. You might have grown into that person. So understanding that this can be malleable, and it starts with setting some goals on what it is that you want to accomplish, and then so I set a vision of what I want to accomplish. Then I check in my beliefs around that. I want a second location. Okay. What do you believe about a second location? Well, I believe it's going to be impossible. Okay. Well, that's going to, then it probably will be, right? Like, yeah. So like, let's get clarity in that. Well, I don't think there's going to be a location in this market. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So we gave a talk yesterday in Portsmouth, and there was an entrepreneur there, and he's got a small business, and he was talking about how he can't find people in the certain realm to do a certain amount of work, and that there's no one here, and there's not going to be any. It's like there's no one here. I'm like, if you believe that, you're never going to find anybody.
Right.
That's never been my experience. We've got an amazing team, and I always believed that they were here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I never in my mind thought that someone wasn't going to be there.
Jen DeRogers is another perfect example of somebody who, like, in a time when nobody could find anybody to work, she had a stack of resumes.
Yeah, isn't it? And she's got great retention.
Yeah.
For a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Because she answers the questions. Do you care about me? Can I trust you? Can you help me get to where I want to go? Like she's dialed in on those three scenarios. For business leaders, those are three questions that all of our employees that we lead have. Can I trust you? Do you care about me? Can you help me get to where I want to go?
She's also built an entire brand around the idea of growth. For her, it's this idea of like living more vibrantly, and like, what does that mean for you?
Yeah.
Like, right. And that means what you're doing, the food you're putting into your body. So she created this kind of cult following locally of people who are trying to be a better version of themselves. And when you're putting that energy into the world, you're going to attract onto yourself those types of people who, and like, it's like, you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Above, security and do you love me? Am I seen? Is personal development.
Yeah.
And then you hear like people like the hotelier Chip Connolly talking about peak and focusing not on the most basic things, but jump to self-actualization and help people find their purpose in life.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
help them grow.
Yeah.
And when you go to that area, when you create a brand that's all about growth and like evolution and changing, you're going to attract those people onto you.
Yeah. So who am I? Why am I here? Why am I here? I'm here to fulfill this vision. Like what's your calling? Like that's what we're asking people is what's their inner calling? And you said, I'm here to inspire people, right? I would hope that's an inspirational message. Like what is your calling? Why are you here? And by the way, inspiration means in spirit, if you break it down, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Go back to the other thing we said. Yeah. Well,
nice.
You chose the word inspiration. I didn't.
So I'm curious back to this idea of like, if we're, it's weird because like how can you diversify if every business out there just exists to make other people better? And I think that like we're just gonna have a bunch of like personal growth, self-help organizations.
Well, what we wanted there, like I would hope anyone who's got if you're looking at bringing people onto your team, wouldn't you want to? And actually, this has been Gallup has published, McKinsey's published. There's a lot of folks who published numbers around this that your retention goes up when you invest in your people and when you help them get better. And that
it's like when you try to push people out of your organization by empowering them and giving them skills and disciplines and habits, they end up not wanting to go anywhere because you're feeding those human needs. Like, they don't have to go anywhere.
Well, and if you got clear on what they wanted, going back to one of those questions I asked, like what do your employees want? Where are they trying to go? What's important to them? And some people are like, well, I just want a paycheck to pay my bills. That's fine, but so what? So I can provide for my family. So what? Like let's get into that because it's important.
Yeah.
Because we want to help them do that.
I mean, the compound on what you're sharing, that the biggest lesson for me in this podcast has been behind every great restaurant is a great person. And to your point again, you can't lift up other people you're constantly working on yourself. You're constantly getting better. And what ends up happening as you get better, you pull people up with you. And if you're pulling your closest people, your employees, like you spend probably more time with your employees than you do with your family.
Yep.
If you pull yourself up, you pull them up, they pull up, you pull your managers up, your managers pull up your frontline employees, your frontline employees pull up your community. And like, this is the transformative power of the restaurant industry. Cause there's the second largest industry in the world. And we have the ability to pull up so many people. And that's kind of my vision with Restaurant Unstoppable is how do I learn and pay for these informations and inspire, giving a view into the lives of these successful people, understanding how they think, what they do in their businesses, so I can give the rest of the industry an aiming point,
right? So
they can get pulled up and bring up their teams with them. And I think it's an exciting time right now because never before has there been so much lubrication on communication. The information just flows.
Yeah, I mean, the information is accessible, right? And because you do things like travel and interview folks that are, many of them are thought leaders in the industry, it gives access to people in relationship to what are strategies that I can employ around systems or hiring or staffing or marketing, right? Like these are, you talk about all these are all pieces and parts. The cool thing is other people have blazed trails. And you can learn. You don't have to be them, but we can learn. Success leaves clues. We can learn from other people's, right, failures and successes, and I think that's one of the biggest things I'll suggest to folks is getting a mentor or somebody that who's living the life that you want to live, or who's got wisdom in regards to something that you want to unlock. And learning from them and their experience, and you provide that through the podcast also. But imagine having someone that you could reach out to, or you can chat with, or a peer group.
I mean, that's Restaurant Unstoppable Network right there. We're relaunching it right now. But I 100% agree. It's never before has it been so easy to learn and to connect yourself with the people that can pull you up and get to that place faster. In terms of this idea of reverse engineering your perfect life by getting clarity on who you are, your childhood, your personal traumas. You also mentioned you want to talk about Social Security and the life of an entrepreneur. What does that? I mean, we haven't unpacked it.
So when it's security, not Social Security, security, self-esteem, and love are the three primary human needs that we have. But let's talk about this episode, the goal setting piece. So we talk about vision and what you want. The second piece is why do you want it?
Okay.
Like your dad, I said, why did you want to quit? Well, that is what we call the lever. Oh, I want to have 20 restaurants. Why? Well, because I want 20. You're not going to have 20.
Right.
It's got to be something that you really truly desire, and want. Like it's got to be a driver for you. So the leverage is really important. It's something that we stoke. Oh, I want to get in better shape. Why? Because my doctor tells me. As opposed to I want to get in better shape because I want to be here for my grandkids. Like those are different drivers, right? There's more depth to one. So what do I want? What's my lever? What's my leverage, and why? The third piece is from there is what do I believe about that? What do I believe about the objective? What do I believe about what's possible? What do I believe about myself within the context of that? It's a deep dive into beliefs around it, because the beliefs are what typically hold us in the frame that we're in right now. Well, I believe it's going to be hard. I believe there's not enough people here. I believe people are never going to spend $29.99 for a chicken sandwich. I mean, whatever. We can go on and on, right? Well, why do you say that? Well, because blah 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 blah. Oh, okay. You sure? So like there's the beliefs that we have, and then the fourth piece is tied to strategy. What am I going to do? And sometimes we go, well, I don't know exactly how to get there. Well, then it's like, what's the next step? What's the next one or two things or three things that you can do to assure, like, well, I'm having a retention problem and I want to have stronger retention. Great. Well, what's one thing you can do? I can start spending time one-on-one with if I say I had a staff of 10, with my staff of 10.
Trying to find out where they want to go.
Right.
And how I can help
maybe
them
having a coffee with them and getting to know them a little bit as a person instead of as an employee. right? Like that's something you could do.
Finding out their drives,
Right.
you know, their vision for themselves. Well, how
Right.
can I help you get
Right. And if you want to build trust, give it.
there?
If you want to build trust, give it. Don't just say, well, it takes time. Well, give it. Give trust. Give
Yeah.
trust. Be open. Be transparent. Be honest. Be sincere.
Yeah, Nick Cirillo from A Slice of the Pie talks about this trust and track business model, opposed to the other side that would be command and control, where you're telling people what to do and you're controlling the situation. Whereas if you just give them the tools, the resources, the systems, the processes,
Yep.
you trust them in executing it, and then you track their progress with the data on the back end.
Yeah.
It's super powerful.
It is.
There's a part of me that wants to push back a little bit. Not that I don't agree with everything you're saying, but I do think that there's a certain level of self-awareness where there are truths that we tell about ourselves. Being self-aware, being aware of your strengths and your weaknesses.
That's accurate.
And I feel like sometimes people who echo what you're sharing with us today are like, whatever you tell yourself is true. Don't be self-limiting.
Well,
But there's also some level of truth.
Yeah,
of,
no.
of being
Yeah,
self-aware
I do-
of your weaknesses.
right. So I believe that if we have a desire, a goal, a dream, an aspiration inside of us, then there's totally a possibility for that for you. That I believe 100%. I also believe, and when we work with people, we might do Strengths Finders 2.0. We have another system called Print. We might do a Colby, might do Myers-Briggs, Enneagram.
I love these things.
Yeah, these are all systems that we can take to learn a little more about ourselves. And like you're right, we all have different gifts, right? Like we all some people are better at things than others. That's what makes a team work, right? Not everyone's an amazing quarterback. Some people are a better receiver. Like it is what it is, right? Like it's
Right.
So, but getting clarity in that is very helpful.
But finding that balance between reality and convincing yourself that whatever you tell yourself is also true. I think there is a balance of being really self-aware and critical on yourself, so you're not doing the work that you're not meant to do, right? So
That's accurate. But so I say, well, I want to build 3 more restaurants. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to do everything, right? Like you can backfill yourself in relationship to. That's part of the reason that we look at these strengths, so we know what we need. My philosophy is maximize your strengths, damage control your weaknesses, and build scaffolding around your weaknesses. Right? For whatever reason, I'm not amazing at managing my own calendar. Sometimes I have a hard time saying no. Yeah, well, it's actually Tara. Tara does it.
Yeah.
So part of the challenge with me managing my own calendar is I have a hard time saying no. This client wants to talk to me. It's on a Friday. I don't do client delivery on a Friday. Okay, well, I can talk to you at 1 because I'm free at 1. But Tara's going to say, no, he's not free at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because he's going to follow the rule.
Right.
Right? But I have a hard time saying no sometimes. So I built in scaffolding around myself. So I don't have to be put in that position.
Right.
Let her handle it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's something really powerful about being really self-aware, owning, like maybe you have trauma around your insecurities, you know, and in a way of, because you're afraid of these insecurities or just insecure and you don't want those things to surface, you're afraid to admit that you're not good at those things. So you try to do it. And if you're
better off asking for help.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'm not good at that.
I agree. It's like, that's an authentic, transparent conversation that's gonna lead that way. That's good at building trust.
Yeah.
I'm not. You know what? I'm not particularly good. Like I know, when we go to Michigan and we have a second home there and we drive out for 2-3 weeks every summer, I'm not allowed to, nor do I try to load the car. Because I did seeing how things are going to fit in the car when you have so many pieces and knowing how they're going to fit in, I'm just not good at that. My mind doesn't work that very well that way.
Yeah.
And my wife can go, okay. And she could see it like a puzzle, like Tetris. That's not my jam, man.
Yep.
And and it's like, well, gee, Chris, you're putting yourself down. I'm not putting myself down. It's just not a strength. I love myself at 100%. It's nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
My self-esteem is totally good. I'm okay. I'm just not my strength. And that's all right.
Right. Is there anything else we haven't discussed in terms of the personal self-awareness, vision, values, just really the self-exploration in terms of reverse engineering yourself to
I think for what we want to cover on that topic, we're probably pretty good today in that regard.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I want to take one more quick break to thank our sponsors. When we come back, something I never talk about on the show, which surprisingly, because there's so many, I feel like so many restaurant owners pass. It's the dream. It's part of their vision is to have something to pass on to their kids. Right. But we don't talk a lot about what that succession looks like and how to set that up for success. So when we come back, we're going to dive into that.
We have to interrupt today's episode to let you know that every second and fourth Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, Restaurant Systems Pro CEO Fred Langley is going live to teach you everything you need to know to run a profitable restaurant from soup to nuts. All you got to do is click the link below.
We're back, and this is something I've been looking forward to in today's conversation. Is just this advice around succession.
Yeah.
Where do people go wrong if we are about to receive a business from family, and we want to make sure our folks are doing it right. Like, what advice do you have around succession?
Oh man,
how did you even get drawn into
it's a really
this world
deep
of succession?
so really the way I got drawn into succession when I started working in family businesses about 12 years ago. A client of mine was working with a family business, and they were stuck trying to figure out how to navigate estate planning and things around just changes and who was going to be doing what, who was going to own what, and who's going to make decisions around what.
Yeah, that's going to be a hard conversation with family because I feel like certain people probably feel entitled to stuff.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And then the sibling rivalry kicks in, and the parents don't want to upset the apple cart because they want to celebrate Thanksgiving together, and it goes on and on and on.
And they want everything to be
so
equal.
yeah, so I went in and I helped work with his family, and it was really helped everyone involved, including the family, obviously. And then it led to other referrals and more work. And I just kind of like, I should probably study this as a career also. So I got studied family business advising. I got certified through that also. And so a big piece of what we do today, and people come to us, is they're somewhere. It depends. Could be 3 years, 5 years. Sometimes 10, but usually it's 3 to 5 years out that they're looking to do a transition and not sure how to do that. Should I sell my business? Should I not sell my business? Should I leave it for my kids? And we tell people the day you start a business is the day you should start thinking about your succession, which is kind of weird, but it's true. And, and it depends. One thing I'd recommend to folks when you're starting out new is, getting life insurance and getting disability insurance, because something happens to you in the business and that's your livelihood. You want to think about your family. You have disability, and it costs a lot of money, but having disability, think about it. Like let's say 70% of my income comes from my work, and then let's say something happens and I can't work.
What are you going to do?
We got two homes. We can go on and on and on. I still have bills to pay.
Yeah.
Who's going to earn the money? You going to step in? Like a spouse going to step in? Sometimes maybe a spouse can, but in some cases they can't because they don't do what you do.
Right.
So then what are you going to do? That's why disability insurance is really nice to have, because something does happen, at least you have insurance to cover you. So that's I'm not here as an insurance salesperson, but I think it's just smart to do.
But in terms of life insurance or disability insurance, is there like a specific type that we're looking for?
Good question. No, just get, you can reach out to us at our office and we can plug you into an advisor that won't lead you down the wrong path. That's because it's unique to your circumstance. So as you're thinking about succession, and you don't want to, I don't recommend folks program their kids to believe that they have to take over in some cultures this happens, because I work with people all over the world, and they like, this is what you're going to do. You will work in the family business. This is your destiny. But I don't want to work in the family. Nope, this is your destiny. This is what you're going to do.
Right.
But I hate it. Too bad. Your life will be miserable. It's just
some people aren't this lucky to have the family business be passed down to them.
So, but regardless, it's gotta, you've got to have a sense of love for it. You shouldn't do something. I don't believe you should ever go and pursue a career or pursue what we'll call it a career owning a business for the money, number one, without loving what you are trying to do. Because at some point, you're going to have difficulty. At some point, you're going to have a terror barrier or a challenge or some shit to work through, and it's going to happen more than once. And you better love what you're doing enough to get through those hard times.
Yeah,
that's
the
bottom line.
That helps you show up.
Yeah. So you get that drive, like that mission, that thing that's beyond me to want to, it doesn't matter. I'm on mission. I'm on purpose. I'm going to keep doing this no matter how hard it is. So that's important. Now the succession piece is like, okay, then how do I keep this going beyond myself? Now I've worked in this in regards to, sometimes maybe it's not a family member. It could be one of our key employees that's been with us for 15, 20 years. That happens.
Yep.
And how do I help that person carry the name on, right? So it's getting, the mission stays the same. The vision can change to a degree. Core values typically are baked in, but there's always there's an evolutionary process of emerging core values, especially when working in next generations. Next generation, I mean, you know what? I really care. I would say someone owns a restaurant and it's a carryout place, and someone might say, I really care about the environment. I don't want this stuff that we're using styrofoam anymore in our shop. Next gen could be like, we're gonna get something that composts, right? So like that's an emerging core value that sometimes the things can get baked into a business, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. That someone brings into it.
I think it's really important to point that out, because I think a lot of people get so caught up in like whatever I put on paper today in terms of what my vision is, what my mission is, what my core values is. Once that's on paper, that's who I am.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't want to be put in that box.
I believe a lot of this can be evolutionary.
And it should be dynamic. I think all people are constantly evolving and growing.
That's right.
And your values and your vision and your mission is dynamic. It can change with you.
It can change. The mission probably won't change as much, but it still could. There still could be a deep dive or an arm of something that grows. I'd definitely be open to that possibility for anybody. But how do I want to keep this continuing? And then the question goes like, well, how do I pull that off? Well, if you have to have a successor if you're going to do succession. That means someone has to be the chosen one or chosen people. The interesting thing is when family business realm, you don't have to work in the business to keep the business. And sometimes people think they get in their head about that. Well, wait a minute. Well, none of my kids want to run the restaurant. Okay. So?
Yeah.
So does that mean you have to sell it?
So in my mind, what that is, if you were a business, the business hinged on you over the next 3 years, your goal is to recreate yourself.
That's right.
In systems, in process, in culture, and like, what is it that makes this space special? Like, document that and manifest it through other people.
Yeah, and in some cases, maybe it's you need to grow the business to afford someone else to run it without you, so that you can keep it, right? So like you and I both know places that you never see the person who owns it. So right? They're never there. Right.
So is succession? I feel like I'm saying this wrong.
Succession.
Yeah. Is it about really? It kind of sounds like any other business where, like, if you're trying to scale it, there's certain things you have to do so it's not dependent on you. So
right. Make yourself insignificant to the business is the process. Letting go is the mental, emotional side. Making yourself insignificant is the physical side. I mean, it's really that simple. It's more complicated than that, but it is that simple. It's what do you do? Track everything you do. Okay, great. You got a list? Awesome. Someone else needs to do that.
So it sounds like the process for succession isn't much different from the process of just scaling something beyond you.
You're right. Correct. And then also building proper governance in relationship to, if I'm still partial owner, someone else, if my family's going to be partial owner, governance is around who owns what and how the second piece, which is the more complicated, how are decisions made? How do we decide what we do, who we hire, who we let go, how we spend the money, what we do with the money? That's around, and around, voting shares.
So what were those elements? Who does what? Who owns what? And what was the other thing?
Who owns what?
Yeah.
Which is like shareholder agreement, right? Like say, well, you and I own the restaurant 50-50. My family and your family. Maybe it's a 2-family restaurant, whatever, right? Or maybe it's a husband and wife own it, and then they have 3 kids, and then they want to give each kid 30%. That's not a problem. Okay, that's pretty easy. But how are you going to manage decisions? We're going to give them all equal share, equal voting rights. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. I've got a family I'm working with right now, and it's we call it 2 brothers, and a mom and dad, and the 2 brothers each have voting shares at like something like 49%, and dad and mom got 2%, so they can be the tiebreaker.
Okay.
You with me?
Yeah.
But when mom and dad are out of the picture, now what do you do?
That's 2% that you're going to find.
Right. Well, you give them to each person, then they're at 50-50, and now what do? You're still trouble. You want to do something, I don't want to do it, now what?
I don't know that. That's what I'm
Yeah. And what if I'm running the business and doing most of the work, and you're just showing up collecting paychecks? Should we still be 50-50 in decision making?
This is like any partnership, so you get out and you put your name down you put your name next to the responsibilities that you're responsible.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way all the time.
But if you have it written down, at least you're saying,
yeah, it's true.
I agree. I'm responsible for these things.
Yeah.
So do you work KPIs into that to say if you fall below these standards?
You could. I mean, I see this in family businesses where you got mom and dad, you got 4 kids. I've seen this probably 6 times in the last 12 months. Mom and dad, let's say 4 kids, one of the 4 doesn't carry their weight, and they and then mom and dad constantly protect the 4th, the youngest, maybe it could be whoever. And then it's like, they're not carrying their weight. They're not doing whatever. They're making $150,000 a year doing shit, blah, blah, blah. If that was our employee, we would have fired him a long time ago. Well, we can't let him go. It's your brother.
So
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
this shit's real, man.
So what do we do? How do you protect yourself from having a shitty sibling?
Your answer is right, though. What are your roles and responsibilities? What is your role? And I have to take the mom and dad hat off.
Yeah.
And put on the CEO hat, and we have to have a CEO and employee conversation, not a mom and dad conversation anymore.
Right.
We have to literally change our roles at times, and that's the only way typically successfully to navigate that is to teach people how to do that. And it's not personal.
Right.
But when you have someone in the family who's in a business, which I guarantee you there's so many of you out there listening, and you know that someone's not carrying their weight. And you might think, we're making it work, you're telling yourself. I know if I go in and interview your employees, they're not going to tell me you're making it work. They're going to say, it's so annoying to me that this person shows up and they're part owner because they're in the family or their family's ownership or whatever, and they don't do shit, but no one wants to say anything about it because we all want to keep our jobs.
Right.
So you don't even know what's going on because there's so much resentment typically in the environment, and people are afraid to say anything because they don't want to be let go.
So in that, how do you handle that situation?
Well, what you do is you wake up and realize that maybe what you say is you think it's working, maybe it isn't working, and you maybe you have a third party or someone start asking around to have the conversations that people aren't willing to tell you into your face. Mm-hmm. And then when you get enough evidence on that, then you say, okay, well, I got to make a decision, and quite frankly, if you have a kid in a business, I say kid loosely because a lot of times they're adults or young adults, and they're not carrying their weight, do you really think that they're fulfilled and happy anyway?
No.
Right? I mean, come on, you know as well as I do, they're probably not. And so someone needs to insert themselves and help that person. It could be find a different role, and maybe in the wrong seat.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of things, right? Maybe they belong better somewhere else. It doesn't mean you can help. So you can still help them, but keeping them in that role they don't belong in the wrong seat, and looking the other way.
Yeah.
Just because you're afraid to had some more conflict than you already have.
The big line items up to this point in terms of succession, life insurance, disability insurance. What's one or who owns what?
Yeah, who owns what,
So,
and how do we make decisions? Who
Yeah.
owns what? How do we make decisions? Right? Those are, and then, yes, and then also, do I know that I want this business to be? Do I want to keep it? Do I want to keep it around, or do I not? Right?
Or do we want to step away from it and just own the assets?
Yeah,
and have
that's right. Yep, exactly.
So-
And it can be different. You say, well, why would I not just want to sell it? Well, you might, or you might want to keep it because maybe your kids don't, but maybe your grandkids might be interested
Right.
in having some level of that can happen. It can skip a generation, but if you sell it, then you're not giving the grandkids any opportunity.
So we talk a lot about the importance of a partnership agreement.
Yep.
In business, and that is a lot of what we talked about before. Is who owns what, who's responsible, whose name is going next to what things on the line items of
That's
all
right.
the things we have to do. How is that different from a shareholder agreement?
Well, a shareholder, I can own something and not have any responsibilities tied to it.
Got it.
Right.
is it just this idea? I mean, I use the word partnership agreement, but in a way, a partner is a shareholder in some ways.
Can very well be, yes. Absolutely. They could
So
be
it's
totally
not too
the
much
same.
different from
In that regard, no. But the difference in the family businesses, though, is you can have a family member who's in the business and an owner, right?
Yeah.
And you can have a family member who's not in the business who's an owner. And you can have a family member in the business who doesn't have any ownership at all. So it can be, it can be one or many of different things.
So it sounds like this really just comes down to get it in writing and have a lawyer get involved.
I agree. I think at the having clear, you're absolutely dead on. It's so simple. And how often do people not have clearly defined roles and responsibilities? Right? It's so simple, but they don't. And if you can go around, we like to go around an organization and we do discovery and say, how do you know when you're doing a good job? And you'll be, well, when my boss doesn't yell at me, when someone smiles, okay, that's not really, like to me, that's like not the ideal answer. Like how are we measuring success with a business based upon your role, and what do you have to observe to know
what
that's on,
scorecards
right?
do we have?
Exactly. Yeah, but oftentimes you don't hear that. It's hilarious. Oh, well, what do you mean by that? Well, how do you know you're doing a good job? Like, how do you know? How do you know your boss? Well, if he doesn't, put it this way, if he thinks I'm doing a bad job, he'll tell me. And if he doesn't say anything to me, then I know I'm doing a good job. Yeah. That's not a good answer.
Right. What are your thoughts on nepotism?
What do you mean by nepotism?
So this idea of favoring in giving priority to family.
I don't like it.
Well, it's interesting because I think it's human nature, right?
Yeah, no, I think we should love our kids, but they shouldn't be giving. And it does happen, and I understand why it does. In families, they get certain exceptions, they get certain rules, and I can understand why that happens.
Why
but
do so many people work so hard, right? So they can provide. So there's something a level of security for those who are closest to you, and you want to provide opportunity to those who are closest to you.
Right. But if I give you a job and then you show up whenever you want and you leave whenever you want,
right?
Because you're a family member, which is what does happen.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And then no one says anything, but then people are like, "You don't give a shit." He comes in when he wants to come in. He does, whatever.
I mean, it's come up recently on the show where somebody was working for Chick-fil-A, and the people who own these Chick-fil-A's, it was clear that they were giving the promotions to family members, and it was like this family-run business.
Yep.
And there's a part of me that's like, meaning, I understand nepotism because I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
To protect those closest to you and to create opportunity for. And I think as the owner of a business, you're giving yourself kind of if that's what's important to you, you own the business. You should be allowed to provide opportunity to those that are closest to you. So, but on the flip side, what's best for the business?
Right.
Right.
So there's some family businesses that have very strong governance.
Yeah.
And the governance says family members are allowed to come into the company, and these 5 conditions are met only. Go to school, so much degree, or whatever type of degree. Work somewhere else first for a minimum of 3 years, 5 years, whatever. So these are requirements that we must have a position open. We're not going to make a position for the family member, and they must fill in, and they must successfully be someone we would consider for that role, and then they will be managed in that role based upon expectations by a non-family member. That's what larger successful family businesses do, and that works.
Yeah. Why do you think those things work? What is it about those 5 things?
There's no assumption that if you're in the family, you're going to be in the business, right?
Right.
Because it just creates havoc.
Puts pressure on people who might not want to be in the business.
Right. That's true too. And then also there's requirements. You've got to earn to get on the field. You don't just get on the field because you're in the family. Oh, you know what? You're in the family. I own the Rams. You get to play.
I mean, that doesn't make. Is this the Patriots? I mean, maybe not playing, but coaching.
All right. Let's say you're in the Kraft family, and your grandfather, he says, "You know what, dude? You're the next we need a new Belichick. It's you. You're it. Go." Like now, that seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Or no? You tell me. Maybe you know a lot about football, and Nick could step right into Belichick's
No, I mean
role.
it sounds ridiculous.
Right? Does it sound ridiculous?
Looking at Bill, he had his son working for him, right? And they have
no.
So I think his son was like his offensive or defensive coordinator.
Okay.
But I mean, definitely.
But regardless, can you imagine?
No.
Right. Because it doesn't make sense.
No.
You didn't even set yourself up to be that person, right? But family businesses do it. They do it.
I mean, I think I could argue the Patriots are still doing it with promoting, Gerard Mayo, the old player. So like they're still staying within the Patriots family, So
but
now
regardless,
yeah.
But
anyway.
he's still. My point is like he's not someone that's a relative of someone that has no experience, has never done anything, and hasn't even prepped himself to even have the option.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I just think it's in human nature to provide opportunity to those who are closest to you.
I get it.
And if you have family, they tend to be the closest. And if it's
I get
not, and then I think there's something to be said about promoting from within too.
I get that too.
So
and if the person is qualified,
yeah,
I'm all in.
Yeah.
If they're willing to show up and put effort into it, I'm all in. They're willing to develop themselves and become the person that can do it, I'm all in. And then restaurants, they can provide. There can be entry level positions. There can be jobs where you can learn on the job, right? You can learn the skills. It's not like an electrician where you have to have a license, but say to go practice. True, right? In a restaurant, there could be a role that you could take that someone could teach you how to do something, and you can work your way through and around the kitchen, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where a lot of restaurateurs go wrong is they don't build these channels of growth, and they don't have the actual framing to say, oh, you want to be the director of operations? Here's the path to get there.
It's a really good point.
So this has been a lot of fun, Chris. I can't believe we're already at over about an hour and 40 minutes recording time. It's crazy
sounds like
how
a lot.
fast. It goes by so fast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't discussed in terms of succession that we should?
No, I the only thing I put out there is just if you have questions, reach out for help. Talk to someone that can give some advice. I had a family member. Someone owned a business come to me, referred to me last year, and he was really was thinking hard about selling the company, which is fine, but the reason he was thinking about selling the company is he just didn't believe that his family members could run it without him. And sometimes that may or may not be true, but it's good to check in with someone else that can at least litmus test that for you before you make a decision along that line.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we've covered enough on the topic for today.
Well, it was fun getting to know you deeper, man, and going deeper and pulling back some of these layers on the information, the things you're an expert in. And I do have a couple more questions before we wrap it up. So what is it about you, a value, a process, a system, something that you do in the work that you do with the clients that you do about, that makes you truly unstoppable?
I think the work that we do around someone's really diving into what their life purpose is and tying that to their work, to like their soul's journey, if you will, going forward. It kind of reminds me of that story around, Da Vinci and David, when he asked him, like, how did you get David out of this, create this David? He's like, I started with this block and then I removed everything that wasn't David, like what really didn't belong, to bring the truth out of what David was. And I think it's a big piece of the work that we do.
Yeah. I'm happy that you're sharing that because I've been trying to tease to my listeners in the conversations I'm having that we're relaunching restaurantstoppable.com. We're going to have a searchable content library. We're going to have a level of community with live events and just like behind the scenes things, ways for our listeners to connect. But beyond that, the third level of our continuity plan going forward is if I, Eric Cacciatore, am opening a restaurant tomorrow, how am I doing it? Who am I going to? We're going to cover 4 buckets, people, process, promotion, and the last one's personal growth. And it touches a lot on the stuff that you're talking about today that I think a lot of other I don't consider myself to be a consultant, but I think where a lot of people come short, they focus on just the business.
That's right.
And it's just like, listen, that business is shit.
That's right.
Without an amazing person behind it. So who are you?
Right.
Get that clarity on who you are, what matters to you, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, own every ounce of yourself and who you are, and then reverse engineer that. Yeah. And then and constantly be growing, because your business will never grow beyond you.
Right. Exactly right. You are the lid on your business, period. And if you apply strategy to a broken mindset, you will not have success.
Yeah.
You will hit a wall. And I see people. This is what's happening. The consultants and advisors out there in our space, very few of them do the personal development work.
Well,
you want to do succession? I'll tell you how to do succession. Go from here, like you said, make yourself This is a process, okay? But the guy's scared shitless because he built this and he doesn't know what he's going to do with his life because he's got all his significance from running this restaurant. Who's talking about that? Right? Who's working with that person to get really clear on who they are and what their purpose is and how they can make it okay for them to move on? Right? That's the real work.
I think this is the cutting edge stuff. This is the next level. This is the next generation. I think that we're learning so much about people, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, anthropology, studying the way we were in the past and reverse engineering that. And it all comes down to you working on you.
Right.
And that's the stuff that I geek out over, you know, and really just trying to recreate those ecosystems that are best for people to be the best version of themselves. So we're going to be focusing on a lot of stuff. So I want to become better friends with you because I feel like I can learn a lot from you.
Yeah.
I think you can inspire me to dive deeper into the personal growth stuff.
You know where the Batcave is now, so.
Is that here? We're in it right now. Is this here?
It might as well be. Yeah,
I love it. Cool. I'm gonna be knocking on the door. Look out. If the mission statement is to change the world through inspiring and empowering the industry, how have you personally evolved? Who is the Chris Yonker today versus the younger version of yourself?
I really don't get in my head about how I'm showing up anymore. I think that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest.
What do you mean by that?
I mentioned earlier, like, I'm talking to someone, I'm not going like, oh, how are they looking at me? How are they thinking about me? What are they thinking? What are they doing? I just show up with fully present as much as possible with who I'm with in my heart and willing to engage in whatever that means. And that's kind of it. Like I'm taking in what I'm taking in, which is actually quite a bit. I read people really well. But I'm just there for the ride. Like I'm not trying to make something that it isn't. Hawkins' work was a big game changer for me. Power versus Force. David Hawkins, really good book, by the way. I plugged that one here. The idea of I'm trying to make something happen. I've got to force it. Whenever I get into force or trying to make shit happen, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's out of flow. So.
I mean, what you just described sounds like 100% my life. I just literally show up to these restaurants. I'm like, I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Right. Isn't that fun?
It's so much fun. But I mean, it's weird because it's like order and chaos, right? Yeah. And I think so much of the business world focuses on order, structure, systems, processes.
Yeah.
There's so much truth to that.
Let's plug one other idea then real quick here. There's no extra charge for this one. Space. Creating space in your day and time is essential. Because inspiration, ideas, our downloads, they come from going on walks. They come from things that they typically come in a high flow state. For me, playing tennis, whatever that is, going snowboarding, things that allow us, could be meditation, could just be sitting in reflection and journaling, taking space. People are like, no, I don't have time for that. But that's where inspiration, intuition, and creativity come from. Yeah, is creating that space, and that is a game changer. That's a necessity.
I think the 80-20 role plate comes into play here. I think that in order to have an efficiently run business that has the ability to scale and grow beyond you, I think the 80-20 rule comes in where I think 20 or 80% of your business relies on order, systems, process, standards. But that's that 20% of chaos. That's the real magic, and that's where the inspiration comes. That's where the evolution comes. That's where the culture is. That's where the creativity is. And like to your point, you have to leave a little bit of wiggle room between order and system and process for the chaos.
Yeah, using the word because I've never seen you use the word chaos, but I think what resonates with me on the word chaos is it's not something I'm trying to control. Which is what that's why I'm vibing with that word in that regard of maybe what appears to be chaos is in perfect order.
What appears to be chaos is in perfect order.
Yeah, what appears to be chaos, what if it were in perfect order?
But
it's not my order. Just
let it be
right.
Chaos?
The order of what is right, because chaos is a meaning or context I'm assigning to what something is. right? Because like, oh, there's so much going. Like, what depends. Like, what do you do? How do you define chaos? What's chaos mean to you? And then how do you imprint that on something else, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, but at the same time, another example would be like any service, right? Like, I think there was a period where like how you approached a table at one point got way too stuffy, where everything's supposed to be a script and you're supposed to stick to the script.
It's awful. I cannot stand scripted places.
It wasn't that long ago where that was like,
oh my god,
best practices.
I never got along with people that are that way. We just lost a beautiful soul in our area, Lenny, which I'm sure you know Lenny or knew of Lenny. Worked at Blue Moon for quite a while. And he passed away in the last 2 weeks.
I actually did not know him.
Yeah, there was a big. They had a big gathering, hundreds. This is someone that worked at like C.R. Sparks. He worked at Blue Moon as a bartender. He worked like 3 different places, and as well as a yoga instructor. Just a really good soul, and you can tell because I had to wait 45 minutes to get into the funeral home.
Wow.
To pay just out and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So people out there are like in these positions, you'd be surprised. And the thing about Lenny that was really fascinating is he always listened very deeply to what you had to say. He didn't say, "Oh, how you doing?" and then move on.
Right.
He'd actually wait.
He was present
to hear how you're doing and what's going on, and then he'd dive deep on that. And the next time you saw him, he remembered. He'd bring it right back to so he was that guy, and that's why the scripting thing is like, because otherwise it's inauthentic. It's just, and I get you have process. Don't get me wrong, but the chaos, but I don't want to go in to a restaurant and check in and have chaos and not be able to check in. You know what I'm saying? Or I don't want to go to a hotel to check in my room and have chaos all over the place and not be like, that doesn't feel good to me, right? You with me on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
All right, cool.
No, like I said, 80% is
right.
order.
On the right places.
But you're not even aware of the order. It's meant to be subconscious. You're not even meant to notice.
You shouldn't feel it. I think I think the beautifully run systems for on the visitor side are systems that you don't even know they're being run.
So again, back to 80-20 rule, right? If we're saying 80-20, 20% of the work is responsible for 80% of the profit. Yeah. I think it's the chaos in a restaurant, the things that you're talking about, the human elements, the being able to tune in. Yeah. It's the experience you're creating for somebody, and that's chaos. Because that should be different for every person that walks in the door. Because you should be customizing that experience to them. Right. And that's where the returns come. So like chaos is responsible for 80% of profit. But I think the 80% of actually what keeps the things on the wheels is order, because there's that number like manifests in weird ways in the restaurant industry. I didn't mean to go this far into it. But I don't know. You got me thinking. But the last question I have before we officially wrap it up, if you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow, all the memories of you, your work, your businesses, your consulting, all that lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
I'd figure out to the best of your ability why you're here is one thing I would say. I would say treat each day as a gift and love into the day and love into the people in your life into that day ongoingly.
Why are you here? Gratitude.
Yeah, I would say gratitude's probably, I guess that would be, I guess, tied to that one, Yeah.
What's the third?
Enjoy the experience and stop resisting what is.
Chris, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much. Well overdue. We cross paths way too often. This conversation should have happened years ago, and hopefully we can have more conversations into the future. And I hope to call you a friend going forward. I really do.
I'm here, buddy.
Yeah. And what about people locally? Are there any restaurateurs locally, people that have really impressed you that you think I should get on the show?
Well, that's a great question. We go local. I mean, how
or
local do we want to go?
Wherever.
Ideally, I would like you to go to New York City. And it's a big one, but I would be just delighted to hear. And if it gets set up, I'd love to be able to at least seed a question or two. Okay. But Eric Repair would be up on my. I mean, we've met him, spent time with his restaurant. In fact, I sent him my book after I met him and stuff to he's got a restaurant and we were at Blue in the Caribbean, but he's also got obviously in New York City. And so I sent my book there, and he emailed me.
Nice.
So he sent me a personal email and thanked me, which I thought was really cool because like that guy's. Imagine how big. I mean, he's quite a celebrity chef.
Yeah. But that's the stuff. That's the chaos right there.
Yeah.
Because what would like that's the little things of the unexpected that make an impression, and it made an impression on you. And I would love to get Eric Repaired. I read his book 32 Yolks. I'd love to get him on the show. Actually, I reached out to him probably like 8 or 9 years ago.
Well, it's time to do so again.
But I think it's time to come back around.
It is.
Yeah.
It's got a lot. Yeah, I think he's got a lot of wisdom to give the community.
I'm going to clip this right here and send it to him and be like, you know this guy, Chris.
Yep.
You emailed him.
He did. He did.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much, my man. How can we connect with you if we want to follow up?
You can go the best URL to get to us is through my name, and that is chrisyonker.com, CHRISYONKER.
Beautiful. This is episode 1059. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/1059. We'll link to that website, and we'll have a summary of today's discussion over there. Chris, thank you so much, my man. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable. We'll cut it there.